Sometimes a football match begins long before the referee blows the whistle. Sometimes it begins with a sentence that seems harmless, a sentence that barely makes headlines, a sentence people quickly forget unless football decides to remember it. Before Japan faced Brazil in the World Cup knockout stage, Japanese forward Kento Shiogai made a comment that immediately spread across social media. He said, "Brazil used to be a powerhouse, but what about now? I think only France and Argentina are strong. I haven't heard much about Brazil nowadays." For a moment, some people laughed, others agreed. After all, Brazil hasn't lifted the World Cup since 2002, 24 years. An entire generation has grown up without seeing Brazil become world champion. France won, Spain won, Germany won, Argentina won, the football world changed, and slowly. A dangerous idea began to grow. Maybe Brazil wasn't Brazil anymore. Maybe the yellow shirt had become just another famous jersey. Maybe the fear was gone. That was the narrative. Until Japan had to face them, and that's when everything changed. Because there is something about football that statistics can never measure. Legacy? You can calculate possession. You can calculate expected goals. You can calculate passing accuracy. But you cannot calculate what it feels like to stand across from the only nation that has won the World Cup 5 times. 5 stars don't score goals, but they create pressure. Invisible pressure. The kind that slowly enters your mind as the clock keeps ticking. Japan arrived believing they could make history. And honestly, they had every reason to believe. Their tournament had been outstanding. They were organized, fearless, disciplined, probably one of the most tactically intelligent teams left in the competition. They weren't there by accident. They earned their place, and, for long stretches, they proved it. From the opening minutes, Japan refused to respect Brazil's reputation. They pressed aggressively. They closed every passing lane. Vinicius Jr. couldn't find space. Bruno Guimaraes was constantly surrounded. Casemiro spent more time defending than creating. Everything Carlo Ancelotti had prepared suddenly looked uncomfortable. Then came the breakthrough. One fast attack, one perfectly timed movement, one finish. Japan scored. The stadium froze. Millions watching around the world leaned forward, not because Japan had scored, but because of what that goal seemed to confirm. Maybe Shiogai had been right. Maybe Brazil really wasn't the giant everyone kept talking about. Maybe football had finally moved on. For several minutes, that story felt real. Japan played with confidence. Every completed pass increased their belief. Every Brazilian mistake made them even bolder. The players in blue looked completely convinced that history was about to change. But here's what they didn't understand. Brazil has spent nearly 100 years living inside moments exactly like this. Pressure doesn't surprise Brazil. Pressure is part of its identity. Every Brazilian player grows up hearing stories about Pelé, about the 1970 team, about Ronaldo in 2002, about impossible comebacks, about magical nights, about carrying the expectation of over 200 million people. The shirt isn't simply worn, it's inherited. That's why Brazil reacts differently. Other teams panic when they concede first. Brazil starts remembering who it is. That is something Ancelotti understood from his very first day. He didn't come to Brazil trying to recreate the beautiful football of the past. He came to build something much more dangerous, a team capable of suffering, a team capable of waiting, a team capable of surviving. Because World Cups aren't won by the team that always plays better. They're won by the team that stays alive when everything begins falling apart. As halftime approached, something almost invisible started happening. Japan was still winning, but Brazil was no longer rushing. No desperate long balls, no emotional decisions, no loss of control, just patience. Cold, calculated patience. And if there is one thing football history has taught us, it's that when Brazil stops panicking, everyone else should start, because what happened after halftime wasn't simply a comeback, it was a reminder that football may evolve, generations may change, new champions may rise, but there is one lesson every World Cup eventually teaches. You can doubt Brazil, you can criticize Brazil, you can even believe Brazil is finished, but until you eliminate them, you'd better respect the 5 stars on that shirt. Because Japan was about to discover exactly why the greatest mistake wasn't conceding 2 goals. It was believing Brazil had stopped being Brazil. The cruel thing about football is that it never answers with words. It answers with 90 minutes. Kento Shiogai believed the football world had moved on from Brazil. 90 minutes later, the football world moved on from his quote, because suddenly it meant something completely different. Not as confidence as irony. Here's what people outside Brazil often fail to understand. Brazil has never been respected because it wins every World Cup. If that were true, the respect would have disappeared years ago. Brazil is respected because no matter how many difficult years come, no matter how many coaches change, no matter how many disappointments the country suffers, every 4 years, the entire world still asks the same question: can anyone stop Brazil? That question has survived generations. And after Japan, it became louder again, because this victory wasn't about playing beautiful football, it was about proving something far more dangerous. Brazil no longer needs to dominate a match to dominate the result. That's exactly what Carlo Ancelotti has built. A team that stays calm while everyone else loses control. And that's where Japan unknowingly walked into the biggest trap. Scoring first didn't scare Brazil. It woke them up. Every minute that passed, the yellow shirts grew stronger. Every attack carried more belief. Every Japanese clearance came right back, until, eventually, the pressure became impossible to escape. That's what 5 World Cups leave behind. Not magic, memory. A winning memory passed from one generation to the next. Pelé never played with Vinicius. Ronaldo never played under Ancelotti. But every player who wears that shirt inherits the same responsibility. Never stop believing, never stop fighting, never stop reminding the world who Brazil is. And maybe that was the real lesson of this match. Respect is never demanded. It's earned again and again and again. Japan earned admiration, but Brazil earned something even bigger. Fear, because now every remaining team has watched the same movie. Brazil can fall behind. Brazil can struggle. Brazil can look ordinary. And somehow, Brazil still finds a way. So perhaps Shiogai was right about one thing. People hadn't been talking enough about Brazil. They are now. And that's exactly why the rest of the World Cup should be worried. Because history has a habit of laughing last. And football's greatest giant may have just awakened once again.